In the late 1920s, a renowned psychoanalyst, Carl Jung, came across a Buddhist text that would deeply influence his understanding of the human mind. The text was the Tibetan Book of the Dead, or Bardo Thodol, a guide designed to navigate the soul through death, the afterlife, and rebirth. Jung described it as the quintessence of Buddhist psychological criticism, and hailed its philosophy as sublime and unparalleled. This text didn't just inspire psychologists, it left its mark on Western culture in surprising ways. For instance, did you know John Lennon of the Beatles drew inspiration from the Tibetan Book of the Dead for his song, Tomorrow Never Knows? Psychedelic pioneers like Timothy Leary used it as a framework for exploring consciousness. But what exactly is this ancient book? Why has it captivated minds across the globe, from Jung to musicians and mystics? Let's unravel the mysteries of this iconic text and explore its profound insights into life, death, and what might lie beyond. But before we dive deeper into the specifics of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, let's take a step back and ask, why should this ancient Buddhist text, originating from the high mountains of Tibet, matter to us today? What can a centuries-old manuscript teach us about the meaning of life, death, and everything in between? At its core, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is a guidebook for navigating the intermediate state between death and rebirth. This state, known as the Bardo, is described as a liminal space, a threshold where the soul encounters vivid experiences shaped by its past karma. The full Tibetan title, Bardo Thodol, translates to the Great Liberation Through Hearing in the Intermediate State. While the title may sound daunting, it tells us a lot about its purpose. The text is traditionally read aloud by a lama or spiritual teacher to someone who is dying or has recently passed. The opening lines set the tone with a direct address to the departed. O child of Buddha nature, do not be oppressed by ignorance and delusion. Rise now with resolve and courage. Through these words, the Lama serves as a compassionate guide, helping the soul navigate bewildering visions and experiences that arise in the Bardo. The ultimate goal? Liberation from samsara, the endless cycle of death and rebirth, and achieving enlightenment. But here's the important thing to understand. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is not just for the dead, it's also meant for the living. Through the reading of this text, we are invited to reflect on our own lives, the choices we make, and how we can prepare ourselves for the inevitable journey of death. The key concept here is the idea of samsara, or the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. In Tibetan Buddhism, death is not the end. It's simply another step in the endless cycle, a cycle that continues until one reaches enlightenment. And how we live our lives directly impacts what happens in the afterlife. Understanding this cycle and how to break free from it is the heart of the teachings in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The Bardo Thodol describes 3 main bardos, though 6 are mentioned in the full text, that a soul passes through after death. Each stage is an opportunity for the soul to achieve liberation, or to continue its cycle of rebirth. 1. The Bardo of the moment of death. This stage begins as a person takes their final breath. In this moment, the soul encounters the luminous mind, a radiant and pure state that reveals the ultimate truth of reality. If the soul recognizes this light as the essence of existence, enlightenment is possible. But for most, this recognition is fleeting, and the soul moves on to the next stage. 2. The Bardo of reality. Here, the soul experiences dazzling visions of peaceful and wrathful deities. The text emphasizes that these deities are not external beings, but manifestations of the soul's own mind. The peaceful deities appear first, radiating compassion and wisdom. If the soul can merge with these figures, enlightenment can still be achieved. But this is no easy feat. Fear, attachment, and confusion often cloud the soul's understanding. Then come the wrathful deities with terrifying forms, multiple heads, and fiery surroundings. These beings represent the mind's darker aspects, and the soul is urged to face them without fear. The text reassures, do not fear them, for they are but reflections of your own nature. Failing to recognize this, the soul moves to the final stage. 3. the bardo of rebirth. In this last stage, karma takes the wheel. The soul encounters womb-like entrances, each leading to a different realm of existence. Gods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts, or hell beings. The realm the soul enters depends on its actions in previous lives. At this point, the cycle of rebirth continues, and the soul begins life anew, carrying with it the seeds of its past. It's important to understand that the Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't just a philosophical text. It's a deeply ritualistic one. Its primary purpose is to be read aloud during funeral rites, guiding the deceased through the bardo. The vivid descriptions of deities and otherworldly visions aren't just metaphors. They're meant to be practical tools for the soul to navigate its journey. This oral tradition is central to Tibetan Buddhism, where the power of spoken words and mantras plays a crucial role in spiritual practice. The origins of the Tibetan Book of the Dead are steeped in mysticism. It's traditionally attributed to Padmasambhava, an 8th century tantric master who is revered as a key figure in bringing Buddhism to Tibet. According to legend, Padmasambhava foresaw a time when his teachings would be forgotten or misunderstood. To preserve them, he hid texts, called terma, in secret locations, such as caves, or even the minds of future disciples. Centuries later, in the 14th century, a young lama named Karma Lingpa is said to have discovered the Bardo Thodol in a cave. This process of uncovering hidden teachings is a unique feature of Tibetan Buddhism, emphasizing the timeless relevance of its wisdom. The Tibetan Book of the Dead might have remained relatively unknown outside Tibet, if not for a chance encounter in the early 20th century. Walter Evans Wentz, an American theosophist, purchased Tibetan texts during his travels in India. With the help of a translator, he published them in 1927 under the now famous title, The Tibetan Book of the Dead. Evans Wentz's edition wasn't just a translation, it was a reimagining. He drew parallels between the Tibetan text and Western esoteric traditions, framing it as a spiritual classic for a global audience. This interpretation, though far from the text's original intent, sparked widespread fascination in the West. From Carl Jung's psychological insights to Timothy Leary's psychedelic experiments, the Tibetan Book of the Dead has had a profound influence on Western thought. Its themes of transformation, self-discovery, and liberation resonate deeply with those seeking answers to life's biggest questions. In popular culture, its impact is undeniable. Films like Jacob's Ladder and Enter the Void draw heavily on its imagery, while musicians like John Lennon found creative inspiration in its teachings. Ironically, while the Tibetan Book of the Dead is widely recognized in the West, it holds a more peripheral place in Tibetan Buddhist practice. For many Tibetans, it's one of many funerary texts, not the definitive guide to the afterlife. In the West, however, it has been reinterpreted as a psychological and spiritual handbook, stripped of its ritual context. This shift highlights the complexities of cultural exchange and the ways sacred texts evolve when they cross cultural boundaries. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is more than just a guide to the afterlife. It's a reflection of the human desire to understand the mysteries of existence. Whether viewed as a sacred Buddhist text or a source of psychological insight, its teachings continue to inspire and challenge us to confront the unknown with courage and wisdom. As we explore its pages, we're reminded that the journey through life, death, and rebirth is ultimately one of self-discovery, a timeless quest that transcends culture and tradition. If this journey through the mysteries of life, death, and rebirth resonates with you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more profound insights, and share it with someone seeking clarity in their spiritual path.